Live, where news comes first. This is ABC-7 Xtra.
Good evening, I'm Maria Garcia. Glad you're with us tonight. We'll be exploring how the city moves forward after the resignation of City Representative Larry Romero. The councilman has verbally resigned, citing health issues, just as an ethics investigation against him was proceeding. Romero suffered a stroke in December and has been out of City Hall since. The city's Ethics Commission was investigating if Romero acted appropriately when he suggested the city hire a new financial advisor, and City Manager Tommy Gonzalez moved forward with the process without council approval. Once Romero submits his resignation in writing, City Council will then have 8 days to approve or deny his request. Ethics Commissioner Stuart Shorts told us that if the resignation is approved, then the ethics investigation will no longer continue, since Romero will be out of office. With a vacant seat, City Council will wait for the next election, which is months away, or hold a special election, which would cost taxpayer money.
Never lean towards a special election unless it truly was an emergency. And because of that, because of the expense and everything, we have to have permission from the governor to even do that.
Tonight, we'll be talking to City Representatives Emma Acosta and Michiel, whom you just heard from. You can email us your comments and your questions now to ABC-7 at KVIA.com. Call us at 915-496-1775, or better yet, tweet me at MariaGABC7. And joining us now are City Representative Emma Acosta and Michiel. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Glad you're with us. So first of all, I really want to say that a stroke can be very difficult on a family, and we certainly hope Representative Romero has a speedy recovery. Dr. No, I want to ask you, you mentioned to us it'll be too short of a notice to put Representative Romero's vacant representative position on the next ballot, since early voting is just 2 weeks away.
Those ballots have actually already been printed, I believe.
Right. So does that mean Central El Paso has no one at City Hall to represent them until next year?
No, there's still a city council. All of us will be happy to help with any problems of the district. There's still staff that are hired for that district that are there. This isn't something that hasn't happened before in another district, and the person did a very good job taking care of the district. And certainly if there's any issues along there, I don't know about Representative Acosta, but I'm sure she would. If somebody gives my office a call, says there's a problem, can you help me out, I'll do my best to do it.
But each city representative already has their own district to take care of.
In my case, I border actually 5 different districts. District 2, District 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I have constituents that are on the border of District 2. And so, you know, I mean, there's nothing wrong in me helping them out. And they come to my community meetings as well, and whenever they come, they get the information. I think we work for all of the people in El Paso, not just a specific district. I mean, obviously we concentrate on that district, but if I have calls from any other district, I try and help them out. And if I can, you know, I let the representative of that district know, you know, this is what the constituent is saying, this is what I told them, so they're aware of it. But I think we all share in that responsibility.
Representative, no, you said you wouldn't necessarily approve of a special election, but Representative Acosta, you have hesitation of not calling a special election.
Well, we're going to have to
have to wait until May.
We're going to have to call a special election anyway, because one of our municipal judges is running for another office, so she will be leaving office, so we will have to call an election for that. That one will be citywide. The one for Representative Romero would obviously only be for District 2. But there's a process. And most times, you know, we don't do elections in the general election because we're nonpartisan. And the general election in March is actually partisan. It's either Democrat, Republican, or Independent. So we normally don't do that.
Right, and until council finds a replacement, Representative Romero can sit on the council, but that seems unlikely. We heard from Representative Robinson, who told us the stroke impaired Representative Romero's ability on his right side, and it was just recently that he regained his ability to write. So it seems unlikely, I mean, that he's going to come back to City Hall in any capacity.
And even if he could, you know, I think it's something that's very personal. I've talked to some other media outlets, and it was like, well, he's still at his office. I'm like, it's one thing to be at your office, and another thing to be sitting there with cameras staring at you. especially if your lips are drooling. It's very personal. So I don't think he would want to do that. I do wish him a speedy recovery. I think we will miss him on council. But unfortunately, if he resigns, we will call a special election.
If council accepts the resignation once he turns it in, then the Ethics Commission says it would cancel the investigation against City Rep Romero. And of course, this comes the same week the investigators sent him and City Manager Tommy Gonzalez dozens of very pointed questions. I know there are people out there who are suspicious of the timing of the resignation.
Well, I don't think you can fake something that happened like that. I mean, you can be suspicious of it, but anybody who's seen him obviously can tell that he suffered a stroke. And to think that he's using that as a, to somehow get out of answering some questions or something, I think is very cruel.
Health comes first. Your health comes first, because if you don't take care of your health and you suffer a subsequent stroke, it may be worse, and you have a family to take care of.
Right.
So I think health comes first before anything.
The City Council can vote to deny his resignation, and if that happens, then the Ethics Commission could continue the investigation against him, even if he's not coming to City Hall. Is that something that you would consider?
I have an email from our city attorney that indicated that we can either accept it or it becomes valid after 8 days. Once he turns in his letter of resignation, if we don't take any action on it, or it becomes official after 8 days.
It automatically gets accepted if
Correct.
we don't do it officially. Now, if we officially deny it, is that what you're saying?
Right. I mean, if council were to officially
I can't imagine
deny
us
it.
doing anything like that.
Well, if you don't have Representative Romero to answer questions from the investigator, then you essentially only have City Manager Tommy Gonzalez to answer those questions, and Noah Hinojosa answering questions. The investigator is not law enforcement, so it's possible Mr. Hinojosa will choose not to answer anything, and then you only essentially have the city manager's version to trust, and you won't have Representative Romero's version to fact check. Is that something you're comfortable with?
Well, Maria, one of the things that I wanted to do, and I had written, I know I sent out a press release. I took out half a paragraph that was in there, because I had recommended that we do an investigation simultaneously with law enforcement, that we call in either the Texas Rangers or some other law enforcement agency, not our police department or our sheriff's department, but an independent law enforcement agency that could do the investigation simultaneously. If there was any wrongdoing, then they would find it. I was told not to do that, people would not talk.
Who told you not to do that?
The city attorney. So I took off that paragraph, and so I sent out the press release saying, and I think you have a copy of it saying we're going to go ahead and initiate an investigation. And then I had a series of questions in there that I myself was questioning. So if they don't come back with any, if Mr. Gonzalez, gives us the detail or gives the investigator the detail, and he can't verify it, but I'm sure he can. I mean, we have emails, there's conversations, there's a lot of documentation that has to be gathered for this type of investigation.
Exactly, though. And so why not, as a technicality, I know it may sound harsh to some people, but deny the resignation at least until the investigation finishes, so that he can answer those questions, even if he doesn't come to City Hall.
The other thing is this, Maria, because it's an unofficial investigation. The attorney that we hired, he's an attorney. He has no real authority to mandate that you answer the questions.
Right.
Versus if you were law enforcement, then you'd have to answer them. But he doesn't. So anyone can say, we're not going to answer the questions, and then that's it. So even if we deny Mr. Romero's resignation, that doesn't mean that he's going to go and answer the questions. Obviously he can, but he doesn't have to. Mr. Hinojosa doesn't have to. This is not a law enforcement investigation. It's an
It's just to
of
look in to see if anything
non-official.
unethical had occurred. If somebody really believes that something criminal occurred, they can, I'm sure, file a complaint to that effect anytime they wanted to.
You know, I have received some calls from viewers asking, what power does the investigator have to compel answers? And like you
None.
said,
He doesn't
none,
have any.
none. And so, I
Which
mean,
goes back to my point. If we had done it simultaneously, and
With law enforcement.
with law enforcement, then we would. They would have to answer the questions, but we don't.
so why exactly did the city attorney discourage you from starting a simultaneous law enforcement investigation?
Because she indicated that people would be reluctant to speak with law enforcement. They may not say, they may not be as open with law enforcement than they would be with an unofficial investigator.
But with Mr. Fisher, they're not bound to answer anyway. There's no incentive to answer.
I don't know, she never had that conversation with me, so I can't say that was her reasonings or what.
I mean, how can Mr. Hinojosa be compelled to answer this?
He doesn't have to. Neither does Mr. Gonzalez, neither does Tommy. I mean, Tommy or Mr. Romero or Mr. Hinojosa.
But Tommy's your employee, and that's an instruction from his bosses to answer these questions. So Tommy is
correct.
Has obviously more incentive to
Correct.
respond. But that's what I'm saying. At this point, you're just going to sort of have to take Tommy's version of the events and check the documentation.
Well, exactly, like Representative Acosta said, there is a lot of documentation there. You can weed through the boxes of emails and everything and kind of get a good timeline of what exactly happened, and come up with a fairly decent idea of how it happened.
But you won't get the answers to everything. I mean, some of the questions that Mr. Fisher sent Mr. Romero was, what kind of conversations were you having with Mr. Hinojosa, if any, before you suggested it to the city? When was the last time you received any sort of payment from Mr. Hinojosa? Those are questions directly.
Mr. Hinojosa is not obligated to answer those questions, though, either.
Exactly.
So we would only be taking Representative Romero's version of that conversation.
But since he's resigning, then the ethics investigation against him will be lifted, and you won't get any answers from him. So even though there's plenty of documentation to prove how the process began, what I'm saying is if you don't have the answers from Mr. Hinojosa and Mr. Romero, you may not be getting a complete picture.
And Representative Romero did answer quite a few questions prior to this.
Right.
The media had asked him many times,
questions.
multiple questions.
And I think that will be used also in the investigation.
Right.
But we can't force him to, even if we deny his resignation, we can't force him to answer the questions. We can't force Mr. Hinojosa to answer the questions either.
Okay, and we have Jaime tweeting at us.
Well, we knew that.
Jaime Abeitia, who always tweets at us when we have city issues. Texas holdover law means Representative Romero serves until he's replaced, so why not go forward with the ethics complaint until he's replaced?
No, that's incorrect. He resigned. He can say it's official as of a certain date. Now, when Mr. Olin resigned, he resigned to run for an office, but he chose to stay. He chose to stay until somebody replaced him, but he didn't have to stay. When I ran for office, my predecessor resigned and didn't stay, and so there was a special election which I ran for, and then I got elected. So it's up to the individual if you want to stay or not stay.
Another tweet, there's deficit of trust with the community as a result of the ethics complaint. Why isn't it a priority for council to address the complaint?
I think council has shown that it's been a priority for quite some time now. I think to say that it hasn't been our priority, it seems like it's on every council meeting we've had. It seems like for the last 6-8 weeks, we've been doing nothing but this. It's hard to get any of the city's business done because of how much time we're spending on this.
And I think precisely that's why I'm sure there are people watching who say, you know, I've been hearing about this, I've been waiting for closure on this, waiting to hear what the investigation is going to reveal, and now I'm learning that, you know, 2/3 of the people who are being interviewed for this may not answer anything.
Well, you know,
So after all of this build-up,
with everything, there's due process, and obviously the ethics ordinance outlines that process, and so we have to wait for the process. We have to wait for the commissioners to actually meet and, you know, talk about the investigation and actually get all the documentation from the investigation. One of the things that held us back was when the complaint was submitted, we didn't have enough commissioners to hold a meeting. And so that was another issue that I had brought up about a year ago, that we were not following our own ethics ordinance. And so that's the result of what happened, was that we didn't have enough commissioners to hold the meeting. They needed at least 5, they only had 3. So I think now, since then, all the representatives have already appointed a commissioner, and so they've had the first meeting to tell them, in other words, they have to be indoctrinated and say, this is a process that you're going to take, and then we wait for the investigation to take place to gather all the documentation. The investigator has been also interviewing many of the city employees. So, I mean, it takes time, it's due process. It's like any court case, it takes time to gather your data, get time, you know, time to actually go through it, and then put it in a format that the commissioners can understand.
okay, let's go to the phone lines. Jesus in the Northeast. Jesus, what's your comment or your question?
My comment is that Romero is resigning without any consequences, and this is an example of white-collar crime, where white-collar crime does not get prosecuted. There are no consequences for them.
Any response to
Well,
Jesus?
consequences imply that something was wrong, and at this point here, he hasn't been found to have done anything wrong.
And the other thing is, he's not resigning. He didn't just come up one day and say,
Right.
you know what, I'm resigning. We knew he had a stroke in December. We know
3 days before
we know he's
Christmas.
been recuperating. We know that he's still not 100%. And, you know, if he doesn't feel comfortable coming to a council meeting in the way he is right now, and if his doctor is telling him not to, and he feels that it's better for him to resign and let somebody else take over, then that's his purview. That's his right to do that as well. I mean, we can't deny him the right to resign if he wants to.
When I spoke to his wife, she told me she believed it was the stress from the accusation against him that may have contributed to his stroke.
We have stress all the time. There's a lot of stress all the time.
Yeah. Well, we have to take a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to take more of your tweets and your questions and your phone calls. And we're also going to talk about the dynamic at City Hall with the city representatives and how this ethics complaint has changed some of the relationships at City Council. Stay with us. Welcome back, everyone. Let's go to your emails. Lisa writing to us, how or why would City Manager Tommy Gonzalez take marching orders from one city representative? Doesn't City Council work as a governing body, which means one representative has no power?
Well, obviously that's correct. However, we all are his bosses. And so there's many times that we will ask him questions, or we will say, you know what, this wasn't done, can you get it done? And he'll do that. It's no different than the previous city manager. I think you ran a story on that, where the previous city manager took direction from several city representatives, not as a body, and then it caused problems. Well, we're all the bosses. He has 9 bosses, and so which one do you listen to, or do you only listen to them and ignore them until they become a governing body? So, and then by that time, you're going to be upset. So you're going to have all these people upset. So there's times that he actually will say, I'll work on that issue, or, you know, let me see what's going on with that issue. The concern that has been brought forward, and I think you were the one, Maria, that showed us a video where Mr. Romero actually asked about the financial advisor in an open meeting.
Right.
And so, why none of us said anything, I don't know. I watched it again, and I was like, why didn't we say yay or nay, or what do you mean, Mr. Romero, or what are you talking about? We just didn't say anything, so, I mean, but he said it in a public meeting.
Right.
And it was published as well. I
Right,
mean,
and
it
Tom-
went out in memos, or not a memo, but a spreadsheet of all the things that he was asked to do. That was a working session.
Yes.
And it lists it right there as one of the things he was asked to do was to look into that, and it's right there.
Right, right. But there, there are concerns that it wasn't. There was a shade of gray. It wasn't a vote from council.
We go all the time to our city manager or our department heads with issues, and frequently they'll try to take care of it if it's a little issue, or they'll start the process and then bring it back and say, okay, well at this point here I think I really need council direction to see if we're going to take it to the next level or something like that.
And that's exactly what we saw.
Right now, the
That's
same
what we saw,
people
though.
who are claiming that he stepped over the line by suggesting that we look into this, just suggesting that we look into this, those same people will do the same thing. They'll tell the city manager unilaterally, I want this done. And so, a little bit of hypocrisy as well. I mean, I'm sorry.
Okay, we're going to go back to that statement. I want to
add something to that, Maria. The city manager handles hundreds of requests for proposals, requests for qualifications, bids, documents, and obviously it's not him handling it, it's the purchasing department. They don't come to us before. In other words, we're not sitting there saying,
right,
yes, issue this one, don't issue this one, don't issue this one. As a former department head of the city of El Paso, even under the strong mayor form of government, that wasn't done. If you needed something, if you needed a consultant, you started the process and then it went to council. And council had either the yay or the nay.
Right.
But the emails show there were opportunities where he could have double-checked with council. There's an opportunity where Dr. Sutter emails him and says, hey, I want to make sure that we have the blessing from the entire council and not just one representative.
Well, you don't have to have the entire council, but you should have a majority.
Right, and that's why he asks, was it an official action? And
Before
there
you
was
take
an
action, and this one would have eventually had to come back to us.
But the city manager never went and double-checked
But
with
you don't
you
know
all.
that.
Yes, we do. It was never in a public meeting. They
But it
never
doesn't have
asked
to
for
be
a
in
public vote.
meeting. He has meetings.
Then what's the point of
He has
open
meetings-
government?
He has meetings with us at least once a month to find out what our issues are, what's going on, what's happening, what do you need, what isn't happening in your district that we should be addressing. So he has all these meetings. So he may have said, well, are we still concerned about the financial advisor? Well, maybe. I don't know.
Well,
I think one of the
he says that he spoke to you on all and before all of this, before even Mr. Romero suggested it publicly, and that he says all of you expressed concern about First Southwest. Some city reps deny that.
On multiple occasions.
Some city reps deny that. Representative Lily Limon says she never complained about First Southwest specifically.
Okay.
But even then, we're talking about why process is so important in open government. If you're saying you don't know if he came to us in our meetings.
I will tell you. I'm going to tell you why I was concerned about First Southwest. When the situation happened in 2013, I think they had a fiduciary responsibility for Southwest to come and tell us, to come and tell the city representatives, even if it's in an individual basis, to come and say, you know what, Representative, we stopped the process of selling the bonds because we got instructions to do that. But no one told us. It wasn't until after it happened that we found out. Now, the other thing that I think...
First Southwest worked for the city's chief financial advisor.
She works for the city of El Paso.
Right, but their contract was with the CFO, and First Southwest did warn the CFO and the city manager, and it was the city manager's responsibility, it was Joyce Wilson's responsibility to tell council that there was a suggestion that there be a delay in the sale of the ballpark bonds. And ultimately, it was your employee, it was city manager Joyce Wilson, who did not inform the council.
Well, I think she had direction from several city reps, whoever they were. I don't know who they were. But I think she had direction from them at that point.
And then beyond her, though, there was still other people who were aware of that, who could have brought that to our attention as well, and did not. And they had multiple opportunities to do so. So why wasn't that brought to our attention?
Like who?
Why wasn't it released to the public? Well, the city attorney knew.
We're talking about the Fulbright report and the email from Joyce Wilson.
Right. Why was it kept from us so long?
We discussed, there was some discussion, but we never got to actually physically see the report until recently when you asked for that open records on that email. That's the first time I saw that email.
Right.
So my concern to the city attorney, and I told her this, I'm usually very happy with her. I was not, because I think that that was one of the first things that she should have given Tommy when he first took office.
Right.
And there was
That would
another.
have kept a lot of this from happening.
There was another issue, and this one was brought up to us by El Paso Times by Mr. Bob Moore, where Tommy's asking for Southwest, well, tell me what happened. He's asking in these emails, and they give him a chronology, and they leave out that time period.
Right. First
They leave it
Southwest
out.
never, yeah.
First Southwest left it out.
never,
So
according to the
that
emails, never
causes-
tells Tommy.
That causes me concern,
right.
Maria, to be honest with you.
And that's why you gave very specific directions to the investigator, Representative Acosta, specifically you. You specifically asked he review if former city manager Joyce Wilson acted appropriately when she purposely delayed the sale of the ballpark bonds for the 2013 mayoral election, which, as we've been discussing, cost the city upwards of $22 million. Are you confident the investigator will find answers to this?
Well, I hope that he does. You know, and I think it's the same thing that happened back in 2013. It's about the city manager accepting direction from 2 or 3 city representatives. I don't know who they are, but so do you say, no, I'm not going to accept your direction until you bring it on the council agenda? And so if you start saying that to 8 of your bosses or 9 of your bosses, you're going to be in trouble by the time it comes to by the time it comes to an agenda, because obviously it takes time. And so many times I think they're taking direction, but I think it's something that's happened, and I think it's something we need to address.
But
And
the issue with the ballpark bonds thing is that at least it has the appearance of being a political favor.
well,
you
you
know what I
said
mean?
it, I didn't. You said that, I didn't.
I mean, it at least has the appearance of being a political favor. And, I mean, don't you think there's something wrong when you, as a council member, did not know that happened until after the
Yes.
fact?
Yes.
The other concern that I had, and I think I put it in the press release, was that one of the First Southwest individuals during that time frame actually contributed to one of the mayoral candidates.
We'll be right back. We have to take a commercial break. We're going to get more tweets and phone calls after this. Stay with us. Let's go to the phone lines. Augie in the Northeast. Augie, what's your comment or your question?
Yes, hello. 2 questions. One, we should continue with the investigation because we have in El Paso a negative light of being corrupt. So let's be transparent. Whatever happens, happens. Second question is how much, it's a straightforward question, how much is it going to cost if we do hold an election? A rough amount instead of just wishy-washy answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, we can't give you an exact amount. I don't mean to give you a wishy-washy answer, but it all depends on how many other entities may be sharing the cost with us.
Right.
So we have to find a date. We have to find out, are any of the independent school districts going to be joining with us? Will the county have any issues that are going on the ballot? Will the state, et cetera? Is there anybody else that's going to share into that? And then we can come up with a much better estimate
tens
of
of
what it would
thousands.
cost the. I mean, it could be
yeah.
a lot more than that if we're
Right.
having a citywide election all
All
on
our
the
own,
city's dime.
right.
It can be a lot more than that.
Right.
But
right.
on the other question that he, on his
continued
first half of the
investigation.
question, was the investigation will continue. On that one, we have spent $50,000 up to now. The investigation will continue. I think we will get the results this week, as a matter of fact, on Thursday. But that investigation is already underway. Mr. Fisher, who is an attorney that we hired, has been interviewing employees and has been interviewing other persons to actually compile his data.
Okay. And now let's go to Cecilia in Central El Paso. Cecilia, what's your comment or your question?
Emma Acosta should not be there because she aligned with Mr. Romero and received $1,000 from the same company at question, so she should not be there. And the city council should not accept the resignation because they would be complicit in any wrongdoing by Mr. Romero and Mr. Hinojosa. Let the investigation continue.
Thank you very
You know,
much.
I think if Mr. Romero wasn't in such a grave health condition, I wouldn't accept it. If he was just to resign,
Right.
I don't think any of us would. But in the condition that he's in, with the problems that he's having medically, I think it would be immoral of us to not accept this.
Okay.
And to the other part of the question that this lady indicated, I think in the press release that I sent out, because there was an issue about Mr. Hinojosa providing financial support for a project that I have for the past 2 years,
Movies in the park.
He did it
Right.
in 2014 and 2015. I am submitting that to the Ethics Commission. In other words, I'm
Self-reporting.
self-reporting myself. I have all the documentation, all the letters that we send out.
And you returned the donation, right?
I'm in the process of doing that, Maria. I need, I was advised by an attorney. I need to go through the process of the Ethics Commission, and then I have to place the item on the agenda for council to accept me sending it back, because it's in the city coffers. So in essence, it's not my money. So the city council has to say, yes, send it back, or no, don't send it back.
I know
But-
there were some questions. The Times published a story about the solicitation of those funds, and I remember you mentioning, you weren't aware that Mr. Hinojosa was being solicited for those funds for that project.
Well, we send out letters, sponsorship letters for the Movies in the Park. It's a special project. I think we all have special projects, and we finance those ourselves with donations from companies, from individuals. And mine, I've been doing it for the last 7 years, and I've had companies come to me and say, you know what, we want to do it again, because we have people coming up to us saying, thank you for the movie in the park. So obviously they're paying attention to who's sponsoring the movies. So when Mr. Hinojosa did it in 2014, before any of this happened, I mean, there was I didn't think anything of it, that he submitted sent in a check for $1,000. Now, the check doesn't come to me. The check comes to the city of El Paso and is deposited into the city of El Paso coffers.
Now, at that point, there was already a sense that he may be competing for this contract, and that's why...
2014? I don't think so.
I know the process began late 2015, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So then...
My process starts like in January. Like
Okay.
I've already sent out letters this year, so it starts in January, because obviously companies need time to look at their budgets and set aside some funds for nonprofits.
You're right. I was
Right.
wrong about that timeline.
Correct.
But I know that stemming from that, you asked staff to provide you with a list of, for you all to be constantly informed of who's competing for contracts,
Correct.
who's a lobbyist with the city, so that
Correct.
you can sort of be cognizant of that when it comes to donations. Let's go to Dennis on the east side. Dennis, what's your comment or your question?
I believe this is a big joke. All the time and money spent on this investigation, and two-thirds of the party will never answer. I think the city council has completely lost the faith of the citizens. You guys are making a mockery out of local government, and maybe you also take a cue from Mr. Romero and all resign. Pardon you. Thank you.
So Dennis upset. Dennis is upset with this, saying, the city's lost trust. How do you respond to Dennis?
I'm not sure what Dennis wants us to do about Mr. Romero's resignation. We don't have any power over that at all. In America, you have rights. I mean, I can't put him in jail and force him to do things without any due process. It's just not the way it's done. He may be angry, but there's still rules in our country that you have to follow.
But just to clarify, as a council, you can approve or deny the resignation.
We can approve or deny. It does not mean that Mr. Romero has to show up for anything. It doesn't mean, because in his opinion, he's already resigned. I don't know that any other city representative is going to say, we mandate that you stay here. And even if we don't accept the resignation, there's nothing that says that he has to answer anything. He may or may not. He may have already answered them. I don't know. I don't know whether he did. I don't know whether he didn't, because we don't have that information until later this week. So I don't know if he has or hasn't.
Okay. And this is from Manny. It's a little bit long, so bear with me. I find it unbelievable that for the first time in about 20 years, we have a city manager who's saving us millions of dollars. We have a city rep who made a comment during one of the meetings about choosing another financial agency and got implied approval by their silence, and now is in trouble, had a stroke, and is quitting. All this in light of the previous city manager, Joyce Wilson, who committed probably the worst crime in the history of El Paso, the demolition of City Hall, selling us the stadium costing twice as much as it was supposed to, holding the bond issuance that cost El Paso millions, and the continued $500 million spending in quality of life issues that are not going to be quality of life, but rather double our debt, and yet we're focusing on criticizing a money-saving city manager and a poor man who had a stroke. Unbelievable.
Well,
So you get both sides of the story here.
right. When you go back to 2013 with the former city manager, I think she also actually did what she was instructed to do by some of her bosses.
Right.
And in her email, she says, I went back, she heard from these city representatives, she went to the mayor, she's saying she went to the mayor, she's saying
Mayor denies that.
She's saying she went to the mayor pro tem, and they agreed that to hold it off. So, and again, you're only hearing like one side of it. I don't know. She's saying she did, and they're saying they're not, so who do you believe?
Xavier wanting to know that. Who directed Joyce Wilson to delay the sale of the bond? Maybe that's who should be investigated. That's the million-dollar question. She says it was Mayor John Cook and former Mayor Pro Tem Anne Morgan Lilly.
Well, no, she says that
They both deny that.
She said they agreed.
They
she
agreed.
had already got an instruction from city representatives, who they are, I don't know.
Right.
And then she kind of said, well, should I do this or not? And they had agreed that, yeah, go ahead
She
and do
says
it.
they gave her the green light, and they denied giving her that
Correct.
green light.
So she did.
Okay. Dr. No, I wanted to ask you, we've really seen a shift within the dynamic of council. City representatives who used to sort of sing the praises of Tommy Gonzalez are now very critical of him all the time. City reps who before used to not even speak to each other appear
Are
to
now
have...
best friends.
Well, I don't know about that, but appear to have a united front
Right.
in this investigation. How much of this is grandstanding? How much is City Council grandstanding here?
Well, in politics, almost all of it's grandstanding. How much of this, what agenda is it towards? I don't know. You and I have a clear understanding that I've questioned this from the very beginning. I really don't know what's going on, and the changes in the dynamics is just as confusing to me as it is to anybody else. I have no idea why we are doing the things we're doing the way we're doing them. I don't question at all investigating this, and I said that from the beginning, but the way we're investigating it, I question highly.
But what is it? Hiring, one of the best ethics attorneys in the state, having an independent investigation? What's so questionable about that?
Well, if you know anything about contracts, if you send a lot of work to somebody, they're going to want to do a good job because they want more work. And so the perception is, if you hire somebody that you've been doing a lot of work with before in the past, or the company that he works with gets a lot of business from the city, he's going to, this is the perceived bias anyway, he's going to do what you want him to do. And so I think it was a very poor choice of the city to choose somebody with those relationships with the city, and I stated that. If we really want to be, because of the perception of what's going on, if we want to eliminate that perception, then you get somebody who's clearly has no bias whatsoever.
But surely you understand the concern, though, from some of your colleagues over the situation with the financial advisor, the fact that Mr. Gonzalez authorized this process. One of your colleagues says he lied to her. Them saying, some council members saying they don't trust the city manager anymore. Do you trust Mr. Gonzalez? Do you still have faith in him as the one employee you're in charge of?
I don't think he's lied to me. At least I hope he hasn't. I think we all have, sometimes we get emotional. And I think one of the things that we need to do when we get the facts from the investigation is to remove that emotion and base it on facts. All of us sometimes get emotional. Sometimes, we're very passionate about a certain project, and so we become emotional.
Okay.
But I think we need to take out that emotion and base it on the facts. Now, what Dr. Noah is saying is that we didn't have any other, say, consultant that we could have contracted. It was only one. That was the only one that was
That was the only one
That
given us. We
was
were
by
told
the city attorney.
this
Correct.
is the one you're going to use.
Correct.
Okay.
And so as to move the process faster, we just said, okay, go ahead, because we need to move this process faster.
Okay. Well, we're out of time. Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Representative Acosta.
Thank you.
Great to have you. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
Dr. No, thank you. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.